Hello, Hearts of Oak. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And it's great to have Brandon Straka back with us once again. Brandon, thank you so much for your time.
Good to be here.
Great to be with you and had a great conversation with you just the end of last week on War Room and obviously heading up the campaign, the WalkAway campaign. People can find you at Brandon Straka on X, Twitter, however you want to call it. But it's the WalkAway campaign, which is intriguing in this current election climate. And I know you've just released a video on that, and I want to delve into that and the engagement you've had with people on the ground. But maybe you personally, I'm curious to engage with Brandon himself, someone who's walked away, and our political allegiance often becomes part of our identity. And whether you're wherever position you are, whatever party you're engaging with, that often is part of you in terms of what you stand for, or in terms of what your family, your heritage, whatever has brought you there. And you were very much in the Democrat pigeonhole. Um, I mean, tell us about that walking away personally before we get onto the campaign itself.
About my experience as a Democrat.
Yeah, your experience walking away and what impact it had on you personally.
So, a lot of people know I was a lifelong Democrat, two-time Obama voter, a Hillary Clinton supporter, and I walked away from the Democratic Party shortly after Donald Trump got elected in 2016. So I actually voted for Hillary in 2016, and my walkaway journey really began with the election of Trump and the just feeling like something was really wrong with my side of the aisle. It just seemed like there was this mass panic and terror and fear and anxiety, and the media kept alleging that all of these different things were going to happen that never really came to fruition. And so I started going like, what is going on, and did a deep dive about the media and their analysis and their reporting of Trump and his supporters. And basically what I came to realize was that I'd been being lied to and deceived by the media that I'd been trusting for so long. And then I started speaking out about that and posting about it and asking questions. And I thought it was a very positive thing because I know how I felt, and I knew how a lot of my friends and fellow liberals were feeling. And I sort of thought like, ultimately, even if people are feeling disappointed that Hillary lost, this is still good news because, we're being deceived about why we need to be terrified about Donald Trump. But what I didn't expect was that when I started speaking out about that I would be so viciously and savagely attacked and turned on, and have people cut me off and unfriend me and, everything that you can imagine. So it really turned my life upside down throughout the year 2017. I lost about 90% of my friends and the life that I thought that I knew. And, and also in the midst of all of that, I was having my entire belief system turned upside down and inside out. And that in itself is a pretty disruptive and jarring thing for a person to go through. So I think to go through something like that and lose your friends at the same time is it's pretty it's pretty upending to a person's life. But ultimately it's what kind of led to me starting WalkAway, because by the time I had lost most of my friends, I just thought to myself, it's a shame that there isn't some sort of network or a community or support system for people who get turned on like this and abandoned like this when they decide to leave the Democratic Party.
So we'll get on to WalkAway 6 years in, and it's been a phenomenal success on those personal stories, which have really connected with me personally. And to me, that's politically, it's the individual stories of why you walked away. It's not the machine of the entity itself, but it's the individual and where they have their personal journey. But what tell me a bit more about you and what it meant for walking away from that, the criticism you face, but that kind of internal struggle, maybe, which you felt, and why you call yourself a liberal and what you call yourself now.
Well, I called myself a liberal, I guess, because the reason why I became a liberal in the first place, or I felt pulled toward liberalism, is because my belief was that liberalism was about wanting more equity, equality, opportunity, that people who are liberals were against racism, sexism, that they were for the betterment of mankind and the planet and our the oh my God, why can't I think of the word? The world around us. I can't think of the word. It's right now. Climate change, ecology. I don't know. The planet. But what I began to see was that they actually liberalism became kind of everything that it claimed to fight against. So it's like to be a liberal meant that you had to be on board with hating white people or men or that everything suddenly was about engaging in exactly the behaviors that I'm against. And so that to me started to feel like something was really wrong. And I'd say it was around 2015. All these incidents started to happen. Like I remember a couple of the things that started to wake me up were, I think around 2015 or 16, I was living in New York City, and I was sitting on in a park having my lunch one day, and this guy approached me, and he happened to be Hispanic, but he was probably just sort of a mentally unwell homeless person, or something. But basically, he kind of like stuck his hand in my face and said that, give me some money. And I was like, no, I don't have any money to give you. And then he said, you're a privileged white piece of, shit. And then he hit me. He actually physically struck me. And I was really shocked. And I kind of, I just was like, what just happened? So I went on social media and I just shared the story of what just happened. I was like, this guy came up to me and he hit me and he was demanding money. And when I didn't give it to him, he brought up my race and said that I was privileged. And then he physically struck me. And the post went, kind of semi-viral because, I didn't have a big following at the time, but it started getting shared a lot. And what I noticed was all these liberal people were jumping in the comments and saying that they didn't believe me, and saying, they were like, well, you must be leaving out part of the story. And then a lot of people were saying, you must have provoked him somehow, and you're leaving that part of the story out. And it was one of my first real experiences seeing how the left refuses to hold anybody accountable if they're non-Caucasian, or or if they fit into one of their kind of victim identity boxes. And the fact that I'm white means that I'm a liar, and that I'm not credible, and that if I'm in any way portraying anybody who's non-Caucasian in a way that's unflattering, it's because I'm lying, or because I provoked the situation, but I'm not owning up to that or something. And I was like, this is psychotic. I'm not making a big deal out of it. I didn't go crying on social media, but I did share the story. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I am the victim in the story. I mean, I was physically assaulted by a stranger in New York City, but I'm being made to feel like it was my fault because I'm white. And then I started to see that kind of stuff happening more and more too with the LGBT community, because I'm a gay man. But once the Supreme Court decided that marriage equality was the law of the land in the US, it was like overnight. Suddenly we started hearing from these new identity groups like genderqueer and gender fluid and non-binary people, and this sort of like radical transgender sect of the LGBT community. And those people started becoming more loud and more vocal and attacking people within the community, saying that if you're a gay male or a white gay male, it means that you're privileged and you're on the top of the LGBTQ privilege hierarchy and you're oppressing the neo trans people. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And so I started to see these sort of like bizarre rumblings from within the left. And that to me felt nothing like why I became a liberal in the first place. So, I mean, those were some of the kind of the initial things that started to push me away. And today I identify as a conservative today, but I think I identify as a conservative because, you know, I'm so used to existing within the two-party system of this country. And a lot of people will say, well, there's a difference between a conservative and a Republican. And I agree with that. I think that's true. But I've seen a lot of things, I guess, in the last 2 or 3 years that have, I mean, not just disappointed me, but I think maybe even to some degree devastated me about conservatives. And so in a way, to be honest with you, I'm kind of on the brink of finding myself to be like kind of politically homeless. I think once again, I think after I get through this election, I have to do a deep dive emotionally and kind of figure out where do I really belong, because I'm finding a lot of problems on both sides.
I mean, certainly in the UK, I find that I'll be very socially conservative, and it's intriguing. And I've met a number of friends. We would have different outlook or different worldviews or different ways of maybe engaging on varying topics, but it's often that we can agree to disagree. There is no anger or hatred. That actually the individual, the human being, is important and has intrinsic value, and therefore, hey, if we see things slightly differently, um, and to me, that's kind of a norm, and that's how I've always accepted it on the conservative side in the UK. On the other side, on the liberal side, on the left side, it seems to be, if you don't align with what I think, that I hate you. And I've been perplexed by that anger that maybe individuals face, where I've never seen that on the right. And growing up in London, a very mixed city, and it's fine. You agree to disagree. You kind of embrace someone, and hey, that's fine. I mean, how do you see it coming from the left and maybe acceptance on the right?
Oh, well, I think that, you know, for the most part, the acceptance I think is been great. You know, I would say that when I started WalkAway, which was May of 2018, you know, it's been overwhelmingly conservatives, and I'd say even, you know, MAGA people who have really uplifted WalkAway, supported WalkAway, allowed the organization to thrive, you know, kept us going all of these years and gotten behind me. And I haven't found it to be terribly conditional. You know, I'd say that the vast majority of people who support me and support WalkAway don't care about my sexual orientation. Um, or I'd say that even some people, I think that they actually find it to be a plus of sorts, because, you know, I do a lot of events and a lot of speaking engagements, and I always stick around afterwards and take pictures with people and hugs and handshakes and things. And, you know, I have people all the time that approach me and say, you know, I have a gay son or grandson or my daughter or, you know, my neighbor, my coworker. And, you know, I so appreciate what you're doing, because a lot of my, you know, LGBT friends or family or whatever think that because I support Trump, that I don't support the LGBT community. And so a lot of people are very grateful that, you know, I'm out there putting myself out there, and I think putting kind of a new face on what it means to be gay and Republican or gay and conservative. And so in that way, it's, you know, I think it almost has been helpful with me, with a lot of people as well. Now, there are, you know, a small minority of people who, you know, make the sexual orientation thing an issue, and it becomes a negative for them. Um, I'd say in a way that's, you know, it seems kind of like from another time. But I think that it's such a minute portion of the base that to me it's not even really worth focusing on. It's always disappointing. I mean, especially when you've got, sometimes I very occasionally I'll get a message or an email from someone saying, I love the work you do. I love the impact you're having. But I just can't get, on board with your lifestyle. So, and I'm just like, well, then just don't think about it. I don't know. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And by the way, my lifestyle is working 24/7. That is what my lifestyle is. I all I do is work. All I do is try to grow my movement, my organization, fundraise, keep things going, travel. I go to colleges. I do video card. Like, that's my lifestyle. I mean, the truth is not that you care or anyone care, but like, I'm not even dating anybody. Like, I don't even have a love life. So I'm like, the fact that I happen to be a gay man, I don't even know why you're thinking about that, because I'm not. Like, I have no love life. So why don't you just stop thinking about it if it bothers you? Because there's nothing to think about. But
No,
I don't know.
I get that you take something and you drive it forward, and that becomes who you are, as an organization or an entity or a movement. But I mean, so 6 years in, May 2018, you put that video up that really went viral, and that launched the WalkAway. So 6.5 years later, uh, we find ourselves in an election which, to me, as a Brit, and I found guest hosting in War Room talking about the US election, but it is so important. It's not just an American election, it is a worldwide election in terms of a huge range of issues that we find ourselves in. But tell us about the walkaway movement for this election, because it is so essential, it is so important. And this election will define not only where America stands, but where we stand worldwide in terms of freedom.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm trying to keep a level head, I guess, as best as possible going into this election, because the truth is, I think the vast majority of people who are paying attention to politics in this country, I'm having pretty massive, election anxiety, and for me personally, I think there's so much at stake for all of us, everybody. But if you're somebody who's been through what I've been through for the last 3.5 years, almost 4 years, being targeted by the Department of Justice, by the FBI, having your life turned upside down, being just brutally stomped by the full might of the federal government. The idea that we could be subscribing to 4 more years of that, or possibly even worse, it strikes levels of anxiety in me that are like indescribable. I mean, quite frankly. So to me, there's so much at stake that it's like, it's not hyperbolic for me to say that I don't know where we go if Kamala Harris ends up getting elected and becoming our president. I don't know how we overcome that or recover from that. And I don't know what 4 more years of this type of extremist Democrat leadership does to our country as a whole. But I know that it's a possibility, and I know that if she does get elected, that I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep doing everything I can for as long as I can to try to be out there on the front lines of turning things around and trying to recover from the situation. But for the time being, I just have to hope for the best, because nobody really knows, and it really is a nail biter. I mean, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen on November 5th, or the days, or God forbid, the weeks following. I mean, they're already preparing us for saying that we may not know the election results for weeks. So I don't know.
And I feel utterly powerless as a Brit, watching what's happening across the pond and thinking, this is so important for the world at large, for the right for us to speak freely on a range of issues. And here, America, you need to get it together. You need to get out. You need to get out to vote. You need to be praying for Trump. You need to do absolutely everything. There's nothing else that matters over the next 2.5 weeks. But actually, getting out the vote and making sure that happens. But tell me, you put out a recent video. I think the text was, "How did America, once thriving nation, fail? In a not so distant dystopian future, got tyrants, teaches a captured society, how America was destroyed from within." You put that out, I think, in the last maybe day or two. Uh, tell us about that and what you're putting out and how you are engaging with the WalkAway movement, with the voters, to show that actually you can leave the Democrats. Actually, it is important you walk away. If you have a belief system, if you have a worldview, if you have something that you hold dear in terms of what America means, you can walk away. Tell us about that latest video and how that is coaxing people to leave the Democrats.
Well, yeah, so it hasn't even been out for 24 hours yet. So yeah, I just released that within the last 24-hour period. But it's before I got involved in the world of politics and before I started the WalkAway campaign, I had a background as an actor. I would say actor, writer, with kind of a I would say that I kind of gravitated toward the medium of filmmaking and things like that. And so I'm very much a creative person at heart, much more than I am a politician or a pundit, as far as I'm concerned. And if I could just make my living only doing creative projects, that's pretty much what I would do. But since I feel like I have this privilege of having the organization and the platform, I like to sort of integrate into what we do kind of art pieces and I think interesting and creative ways to try to make people think or see a situation, rather than just doing like a traditional sort of political video or a political message, or just sitting in my car yelling all of my opinions into my iPhone or whatever. So in this latest one, we made when I say we, I have a very small team that assists me with graphic design, editing. We all kind of work together, just a couple of us. But we came up with this idea to make this sort of like dystopian future short. It's only 5 minutes or something, and people really should watch it. I think it's really, really good. But basically, kind of the concept of it is that it takes place sometime in the nondescript but not too far off future, after America has fallen, the country has gone down, and essentially like perhaps like a future civilization is what it has sort of unearthed this film, learning how America fell. How did it happen? And so in this video, it's shot in the style of like an old kind of 1950s educational film, which we were able to kind of justify that concept by saying, well, the country fell, and so we lost our prosperity and our progress and everything. So we're almost kind of like this future civilization sort of starting from scratch. So they don't even have the technology that we have today. So that's why it looks kind of like old timey. But anyway, through this medium of kind of this old timey looking film, we're explaining the 4 steps that tyrants use to destroy free nations and to take over. And so basically, step 1 is the infiltration of the press and the media, television shows, things like that. And then step 2 is essentially, infiltrate the education system and turn young people against their parents and against their country. Step 3 is take over one of America's major political parties. And then step 4 is to basically eradicate anyone from the government who objects to the regime, and install people who are infinitely loyal to the establishment. But we use these really interesting images of people like Mark Zuckerberg, or the women from The View, or AOC, or Bernie Sanders, and Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden. We show all these images of basically how they fall into this plan. And it's very entertaining, and I think it's very jarring. I mean, people have watched it and said they think it's very disturbing. One person told me they thought it was one of the most powerful kind of portrayals of what could happen if we continue down the path that we're on. So I would highly recommend everybody watch it. It's on my Brandon Strzok and WalkAway campaign X account. It's on my Facebook account. It's on our YouTube channel, but it's being severely suppressed on you. I mean, I don't even think it's gotten 2,000 views on YouTube, which is insane, because we're at something like 600,000 views on X or something. But if you go to the WalkAway campaign YouTube channel, it's there, and it's called "Got Tyrants: How America Fell."
Well, people can. It's one of the many intriguing situations we find ourselves in this election, that Elon Musk is the free speech champion on Twitter, on X, and we find that in the UK as you do stateside. But I mean, what were the specific? There are a whole range of issues, and the left seems to have moved away from a working class party that supports the underdog and those who are not part of the high echelons of society. The left seems to have moved away towards an ideology, a woke ideology of pushing an LGBT agenda across the board, irrespective of what happens, especially in schooling system, pushing open borders, pushing the dismantling of what the American dream is about. I mean, when you look at it personally, how do you see that as maybe the trigger point? We all have a trigger point of what changes us politically, and you've touched on that at the beginning. But the immigration issue, I guess the sexualization of children that we've seen pushed on the schooling system, the free money for everyone, the massive debt that's been ramped up. I mean, for you personally, what kind of those issues fitted in with you saying this just isn't working?
Well, I primarily for me, it was the betrayal of the media. I mean, the realization that I had been lied to and deceived by the media, that I believed that I could trust. I mean, that to me was first and foremost and primarily the number one thing that shocked me awake. But then I think as it pertains to like cultural issues, certainly matters. So LGBT stuff is close to my heart because for better or for worse, am a part of that community, and so I think that the fear mongering around Trump and his supporters as it pertains to LGBT people, that was a big thing for me. Because I know that so many people who happen to be gay or lesbian or whatever, they don't realize that they're being lied to by the Democrats and by the media. And so they're kind of suspended in a perpetual state of fear and this belief that they have no option to be anything but a Democrat and no option to do anything except for believe the stories they're being told by the Democrats. And it's so manipulative and exploitative. But another thing too are race issues. I have a real issue with that. And I think we saw that in 2020 more than anything when George Floyd and the whole Black Lives Matter debacle, just took siege, I think, on our country and our culture. To me, it was 100% the most detrimental thing in terms of race relations that's happened in my lifetime. And I think it really fundamentally changed the way that we all feel about each other on no matter what side of the aisle you're on, even if you're on the left and even if you're buying into the big lie about George Floyd and the big lie about police brutality and things like that. I think that it forever changed the way all of us feel about each other in terms of race relations in a way that is very negative. And I think it'll take us a very long time to move past that. So, I mean, it completely, I think, eroded and destroyed so much decades of progress that we made on the issue of race in this country. And, people don't really talk about it. They just sort of, they know better because we also, exist in this state of cancel culture that if you tell the truth about how you feel about race relations, you put yourself in the line of fire to lose everything. But if people were being honest and felt safe to tell the truth about how they were feeling, they would tell you that, they fundamentally don't feel the same anymore about racial progress as they used to. And that, I think people are now more skeptical, more suspicious, more mistrusting, have negative feelings about each other, about race, that they didn't have before 2020. So, it's things like that that to me are just really kind of heartbreaking and devastating about how the left's just completely dishonest and duplicitous and really kind of authoritarian uh, demands that they want to place on all of us about their ideology. It's been completely to the detriment of us unifying with one another or coming together as a country or coming together as a people. It's been nothing but destructive.
Yeah, because in London, and I found it different living in London compared to living in Ireland. Very different culture, concept of belonging, but people just get on, and color or sexuality doesn't really come into it, and you all feel as though you're a Londoner, you live here, and maybe in somewhere like New York, maybe that kind of still happens, that mixing up of ideas, and color and belief systems, and everyone just gets on. I find it so strange how the left have taken this divide and rule, I guess, idea, and ruled it out worldwide to say, well, this is why we're different, instead of saying, well, what actually unites us, what connects us, what makes us come together and make a nation important. And yet the left are intrinsically, I guess, engaged on coming up with what breaks us apart. And
Yeah.
it seems to be such a destructive ideology.
Yeah. Well, and in addition to that, I would also add that in order to try to make their point or force their point forward, they actually engage in just about every behavior that they're alleging to be fighting against on behalf of these different, so they'll tell you that, well, we're standing up for black people because black people are silenced and their voices are oppressed and they're not allowed to have the same opportunities as other people. Okay, but then to fight for that cause, they're saying that if you're white, you need to shut up. You're not allowed to have an opinion. This is your time to sit down, be quiet, and do what you're told. And so, I mean, it's exactly the same oppressive, authoritarian, abusive, and kind of subjugating behavior that they're claiming to fight against on behalf of these other people. And what's really interesting to me, and I think probably that thing more than anything, is what really created all these negative feelings in me in the post like George Floyd cultural era, is I've been told so many times in the last 4 years that it's time for a reckoning with white people, and that it's time for white people to have tough conversations. They don't say it like that. They just say this is a time for tough conversations. But what's interesting is that it's not a two-way street. If you try to have a tough conversation with either a black liberal or a white liberal who's arguing on behalf of the black ideology, and you say, well, let's have a tough conversation about the reality of police brutality, crime statistics, and how the things that you're alleging are happening are actually incredibly rare. In fact, so rare that most of the time you guys have to make up hate crime hoaxes to try to push this narrative forward. I mean, every camera conceivable went running when Jussie Smollett claimed that he was the victim of anti-black MAGA hatred, but the whole thing had to be manufactured and made up because it happens so infrequently that you can't find a real example of it actually taking place. But you don't want to have that tough conversation. You don't want to be on the receiving end of the tough conversation. You just want to be dishing out and doling out the tough conversation, which is mostly a pile of lies and false assertions and fabrications. And you want me to just sit there and you want to force feed it down my throat because we're now living in this era that, it's allegedly, the time for white people to just shut up and take it. And so I don't know. It's very interesting to me how on the one hand, they'll claim that, we're trying to better the world by fighting against, oppression and silencing people's voices and all this stuff. But those are exactly the tactics that they use to try to force their agenda forward.
I think utter BS is the term without without
Yeah,
expanding on that.
right.
But tell me about the personal videos, because I've watched a number of them of high profile individuals and just general public people in the public getting sick and tired of actually had enough of voting for the Democrat Party and saying actually enough is enough. Going to vote differently. But tell us about those personal stories, because
Right. So, from the beginning, WalkAway has been a testimonial campaign from the moment that I launched it 6.5 years ago. And at this point, we've acquired tens of thousands of written and video testimonials, people sharing their stories about why they're walking away from the Democrat Party. And it's very unfortunate because we started as a Facebook group, and Facebook banned us in January of 2021 with no explanation, no opportunity for recourse, no ability to appeal, um, and we were truly never given a reason why. And we know for a fact that we did not violate any terms of service with Facebook, because the only thing we posted in the Walkaway group was the testimonials and real stories of people and some promotional posts about if we did events or fundraising or selling merch or things like that. So there was no reason to get rid of us. But when they did that, they deleted tens of thousands of walkaway stories. Now we still have a lot on our YouTube channel, and we've launched a new Facebook group where we've got we're slowly building back and getting more and more stories. But yeah, I mean, these stories are all different people: black, brown, white, straight, gay, old, young, fat, thin, everything in between, every type of person coming together, just speaking up and sharing their stories. And it's been incredibly powerful. And I think through the virality of these stories, more and more people learn about the walkaway movement. They learn about the reasons why they should walk away if they're still hanging on to their allegiance to the left. And then people feel inspired to join our movement and share their own story. And you know the stories, each one is different, and the reasons for each one is different, but there's a common theme of each one, which is betrayal. That at some point or another, someone had an awakening to the realization that they're being lied to and betrayed by the Democrats. And whatever it is, the catalyst that caused that is different for every person, but the result is the same, that once they see that betrayal, they can't unsee it. And then ultimately people end up not being able to go back and not being able to support any longer.
I mean, for you, it's a normal thinking through of where you fit politically and whether or not you want to reject where you've been. And yet no one's done this. I mean, have you sat and thought, why has no one actually done videos of this this ideology is bankrupt and I need to walk away? Not necessarily that you embrace Trump or you embrace Republican ideology, but actually where I am in terms of political ideology isn't working and I need to walk away. I find it intriguing that you've come up with this idea of just walking away from your political belief system that no one else has come up with before.
Well, yeah, and yes, I agree. I mean, I think the idea was a really a good one, and I think it was needed. Again, I would say that I think what I bring to the table in the conservative movement is fresh, creative ideas that tend to resonate with people, I think, in a unique and interesting way. Um, I've had a lot of success in the last 6.5 years, but I don't think that I've had a lot of success because I'm some brilliant political strategist, or some like poli sci prodigy, or something like that. It's not like that. I think the reason why I resonated so much with people is because I'm a genuine and authentic person who came into the conservative movement with a lot of creativity and ideas that I think are unique. And that, I think, is what has resonated with people so much about me and what I do. And the idea for testimonials, to me, it felt like the most logical thing. We're all sort of having this common experience, but nobody's really talking about it. And you know what, to be honest with you, in this January, in just a few months, I will be 10 months I will be 10 years sober. And I began my journey of sobriety, in AA. And so I bet probably subconsciously I was even inspired by AA, just like going to meetings and having people, sit around in a circle, sharing their personal accounts and their feelings and their experiences and kind of supporting each other. And probably subconsciously, I thought to myself, why don't we just, have a digital version of that for people leaving the Democratic Party? I don't know if I've ever considered that, but I'm sure that probably was a big part in what inspired me to do that. I will say that what kind of bothers me, and at the beginning of this conversation, I told you that a lot of things have disappointed me and devastated me about the conservative side of the aisle, and kind of led me to this place where part of me feels like I have to kind of have a little bit of self exploration after the election to figure out how I feel about a lot of things. But one thing that bothers me about the conservative side of the aisle is that when somebody comes in and has good ideas and unique ideas, rather than everybody just getting behind that person and supporting them, which a lot of people have gotten behind me and supported me, but a lot of people on the right have actually, rather than getting behind me and supporting me, I'd say tried to kind of co-opt what I was doing and try to kind of take it and make it their own, seeing the success of it and seeing that there's potential there for fundraising or attention or media opportunities or what have you. They said, well, I'm going to make this WalkAway thing about me, and I'm going to, so it started getting kind of broken apart and fragmented. All these different groups started saying, well, we're the Black WalkAway, and we're the Latino WalkAway, and we're the Chinese WalkAway, and doing their own thing. And then, and that I'm even seeing in these last months leading up to the election, all of these different organizations and groups saying, oh, we're going to do testimonial videos about people leaving the Democrats and supporting Trump. And I'm like, that's WalkAway. I mean, you're literally, we're already doing that, but it's unfortunate that, a lot of people on the right they'll take a good idea, and rather than just get behind it and say, you know what, you had a great idea, you're doing a great job executing it, let's just further amplify and lift up what you're doing, they want to reach in and pull it apart. And it's very frustrating, and it not only frustrating, but it does a great disservice to all of us, because all it does is sort of dilute the success of this thing that was happening, and then ultimately it may end up costing us the election. I mean, maybe we won't win in 2 or 3 weeks, and maybe we would have won if we could have just reached more people to get them to walk away. But instead, all of these like powerful influencers and organizations on the right, rather than just getting behind what I was doing, decided to try to, for their own benefit, their own fundraising, their own attention, just kind of grab a piece of it and pull it in for themselves. And I don't know, I'm not the only person this has happened to. It's happened to a lot of people, I think, on the right, but it's an ugly side of politics, and ultimately one that I think is really detrimental to our success.
And wherever you go, everyone wants to make it about themselves instead of actually the good of the country. And that is a struggle that I think we all face here in the UK as well as the US.
Yeah.
My final thought with you, I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr. joining the election, because someone who's so ingrained on the left coming on board with Trump, because he says, actually, we've got a much bigger chance of doing what we need to do in saving the country in terms of health, in terms of removing the chains of I guess the lobbying industry, especially in terms of farm and food. But that's intriguing. How have you seen that from someone who maybe would have very much been in the Kennedy camp prior, or maybe even currently? How have you seen that coming together, and how do you think that will impact the upcoming election?
Oh, I think it's a really positive thing. I think JFK RFK Jr. dropping out, I think brought a surge of momentum back into MAGA that was really needed. And I think on top of that, there's this interesting alliance that's forming where you've got two different people that were, or two different groups of people that were behind two different candidates for very different reasons, and they're finding common ground with each other while not necessarily ceding or relenting any of their own personal ground. And there's like this amazing opportunity, I think, to learn from one another and ask each other a lot of questions and kind of grow, I think, what it means to be MAGA, and I think grow what it means to be Maha. And I think also it's a huge relief in a lot of ways that after 8 years of MAGA people being branded racists and bigots and Nazis and deplorable, horrible people, and that any sort of political disagreement or discourse is always so vitriolic and just vicious and so savage, that we're now kind of coming together with this other group for which we're not necessarily directly politically aligned, but that we're able to civilly engage with one another and have discussions and debates and opportunities to learn from each other in a way that's really productive, that we haven't really experienced in 8 years. And I think that feels really inspiring and like relieving to people in this way, that, okay, this does still exist. Doesn't really exist very much with the political left, but there is this sort of middle group that is kind of, joining forces with us, again, without necessarily ceding their own ground, and that we're able to find overlap with one another and then engage civilly with each other on the things that we don't agree on.
I think that's the way forward for the country, 100%. Brandon, thank you so much for your time. I'm intrigued by what you set up, jealous of your success, and it's exciting to see how you're bringing people from all walks together. And for the viewers and listeners, make sure you're following at Brandon Straka on X, on Twitter, and hashtag WalkAway. Make sure and look at those videos and spread them far and wide, because I think it's those personal stories that really will connect with people and affect how people vote in weeks, only weeks to come, to the most important election of certainly my lifetime.